Informational forum. Slight change to the agenda. We're going to start with, I think we might have in the original, we're going to start with CCAT making their presentation, followed by our esteemed colleague from the House, because all the members of the House are esteemed. And then we'll go on to our restaurant association. So I would want to welcome Ron Angelo first, CEO and President of Connecticut Center for Advanced Technology. Before I begin, are there any comments from the chairs?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
I was accused of taking the easy meetings, but I think that's probably accurate. So let's move ahead with Ron, if that's how you're looking to do this.
Thank you. Senator Hartley, Representative Meskers, members of the Commerce Committee. My name is Ron Angelo. I'm the President and Chief Executive Officer for the Connecticut Center for Advanced Technology. And with me today is Dr. Jackie Garofano, CCAT's Chief Technology Officer. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today about the valuable programs and services CCAT delivers to Connecticut manufacturers and the broader role CCAT plays throughout Connecticut's industrial base. For more than 20 years, CCAT has been developing, implementing, and delivering many of the most impactful programs and services to Connecticut manufacturers of every size and from every sector. CCAT empowers global industrial companies and the manufacturing supply chain to drive innovation, enhance efficiency, and embrace cutting-edge technologies. The CCAT team consistently validates new technologies with our focus on model-based workflows, digital thread technology, non-destructive testing, automation, autonomous systems in manufacturing and additive manufacturing to mitigate the risks of technology adoption, enabling the industry to reduce costs and achieve more with less. The slide behind me shows 778. Those are the number of companies and entities CCAT was involved with and impacted just last year alone. So we've got a pretty mighty team out there delivering some great programs and services. In addition, more than 13,000 individuals throughout Connecticut attended, participated in some way in CCAT events, trainings, and programs. So some pretty good numbers. The CCAT team leads state, regional, and national partnerships that assist the manufacturing industrial base with the awareness, demonstration, application, and adoption of technologies and critical training to strengthen the global competitiveness of Connecticut manufacturers, thus creating an ecosystem for organic growth. And at this time, I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Jackie Garofano to expand on our technology, talent, and training portfolio.
Thank you, Ron, and good afternoon, everyone. As an applied technology center, CCAT must deliver valuable and validated results to companies quickly. Centered in 3 world-class facilities, CCAT operates as an innovation, technology, and training hub for Connecticut's manufacturing ecosystem, enabling our team and partners to drive impact at scale. CCAT leads and empowers the future of manufacturing technology today. With a passionate team of engineers, technical advisors, and trainers, our team is dedicated to helping manufacturers boost efficiency, quality, and productivity. As a trusted partners for the broader Connecticut manufacturing technology ecosystem, our team is comprised of renowned subject matter experts, several PhDs, engineers, and technologists, the latter being individuals who are self-taught master craftsmen with decades of industry experience. We guide companies to explore and adopt advanced technologies and nurture top-tier talent. These technology services work in tandem with critical technical training to provide the most complete and holistic solution to a manufacturing company. This one-stop approach enables CCAT to drive results efficiently and seamlessly, meeting companies where they are. Our talent and training accelerator, under the leadership of Dr. Amy Thompson, houses a state-of-the-art digital thread lab, additive workflows lab, a digital booster, and a talent launchpad. All are resources to deliver valuable training in the most efficient and impactful way possible. CCAT is built to accelerate digital transformation for the defense industrial base, critical to our state's economy, ensuring our nation's warfighter is empowered by an advanced and responsive supply base. CCAT is an integrated force multiplier, gaining strength from each other and our partners to leverage valuable resources to deliver best practice models and technology solutions to our manufacturers. And at this time, I'll pass it back to Ron.
So in closing, we are in fierce competition. Only now our continuously advancing digital world is the contested domain. And CCAT is developing and supporting the digital craftsmen of today to ensure Connecticut's global competitiveness in the years ahead. Our team is in the business of growing business to improve a company's top line by capturing new business while driving out cost to improve a manufacturer's bottom line. Driving awareness and engagement and accelerating technology adoption will continue to be top priorities of CCAT and are in alignment with those of the Chief Manufacturing Officer, Paul Lavoie. This committee's dedication and supports for Connecticut manufacturers and the entire business community has been unwavering, and much of CCAT's work in the past few years would not have been made possible without it. We look forward to working with you throughout this legislative session as your trusted resource and partner to grow Connecticut's manufacturing base and economy. Thank you, and we're available for questions.
I'm going to kick it off as with my prerogative here. So there are two. I'll make an observation that I've made to many committees or many entities in the state, and it'll be my first line criticism where it would be very helpful. I think your mission, your statement, and your activity, what it would be helpful is in consideration if we could expect to get whatever short training videos, whatever recruitment and sending it through the clerk. My biggest criticism when I get to many of the agencies of the government is that we are all politicians on this side of the fence, and we all have weekly newsletters, we all have videos. We're always engaged in constant outreach to our community. As you're looking to broaden your base and your effectiveness, we're going to send out to a broader universe potentially than you are already in contact with to drive some interest. So videos about the resources and your recruitment in terms of, or your openness to improve the manufacturing process and catch the small manufacturers who may not be either aware or involved. So that'd be the first. I'd like to see that. I'd like to have that conversation afterwards versus dragging everyone to kind of go through what kind of your training modules look like to figure out how we can package stuff to go out to all of our representatives and our senators on both sides of the aisle to go out to their community so we can broadcast that. So the two questions that's just a pro forma. I'm going to be doing that to a lot of the people presenting to us. On a pro forma basis, I have two questions. One is that engagement with manufacturing. You mentioned 3 facilities. Give me a brief overview of the 3 facilities, what type of manufacturers you're currently working, like what's an average day look like or month on activity and engagement with those manufacturers. And the second piece, which we had a prior conversation, I'm concerned about the adoption of technology at the university system. So both your efforts to train the university professors or curriculum managers in getting the curriculum rolled out. You know, if you're at cutting edge technology, there's no way that we are hiring cutting edge technology academics because the academics have been there for 5 or 10 years or 20 years. So the adoption of technology and the training is super important and getting them up to speed on the new technology. So I want to hear about those two efforts, and then I'm going to turn it over to everybody else for questions. That would help give us an idea of the overview so people could follow through.
I'm going to let Jackie give the overview on the facilities, but you brought up a very good point at the end, Representative Meskers. The acceleration of technology is daunting now. That's why you don't hear CCAT mention Industry 4.0, which is probably the most common term. We've already sort of blown through a lot of that. And so we are very surgical, strategic in what we do, specifically tailored to the Connecticut industrial base. There's many regions around the country, and some have different strengths. It is our job to determine what matters the most to our supply base here in Connecticut. And some of these companies have 10 people, and some of them have several thousand. We work like top down, bottom up. We have an amazing team that at times is working at very high levels to understand where that puck is going. Where do we see technology and be ahead of that? But also at the same time, we have to be working with companies today that need valuable help. So on the university level, it is so key because we're trying to keep up. And now we actually have already started the first cohort we put together as a faculty fellowship program. So we have professors from all around the state, various different universities who are coming to CCAT to get trained over a long period of time to understand what are these digital thread technologies, how do you advance them so they can then pull them into their curriculum in their later stage engineering and STEM programs. So your point is extremely well taken. We're looking at that. That needs to be expanded on tremendously, though. You're exactly right. We need to be graduating engineers that are the best of the best anywhere in the country. And there is a bit of that delta just because the lag and the pace of technology.
So if I may speak about our 3 facilities, we have CCAT's headquarters, which has been there for nearly 2 decades. Although, however, over the last year and a half, we have developed and built out our talent and training accelerator. This is our training facility whereby the small and medium-sized manufacturers in the state of Connecticut, as well as across the region, the Northeast in particular, because that's what the Department of Defense has funded CCAT for, to be able to build that out. So we have a very strong leverage of our federal portfolio, which I've been working on for the last 4 years, and now in concert with Dr. Thompson. Our Talent and Training Accelerator is the newest of our existing others. So we have our Advanced Technology Center, where we have our team of engineers and technologists that's nestled on the campus of RTX Research Center. Although, again, we are a nonprofit agnostic to all of the wonderful companies and OEMs that we have in our state. Many of our colleagues, such as myself, have come from large industry, and so we are now, all of us are mission focused on supporting the backbone of our country and of our state, being those small and medium manufacturers. As we said, we need to meet them where they are. So we also approach via snail mail and not just using digital and social media, although all of the email communications that we can amplify is so critical. So thank you for that opportunity. Our 3rd facility is in its 6th year of operation. This is a public-private partnership with Pratt & Whitney and the state of Connecticut. That is our Advanced Composites Technology Center. So there we have a smaller team of engineers and technicians that are working hand in glove with Pratt & Whitney to develop composite fan blades. And actually, I was just introducing a company from Massachusetts this morning who has bought a facility in Enfield, Connecticut, who is planting roots here in our state. So we are drawing manufacturers, and that's again also with Advanced CT. So this Connecticut ecosystem is very strong. Ron addressed our faculty fellowship program, and I'd just like to expand on that comment to say that the multiplier effect that we have through academia is through those who are teaching. And of course, there are individuals who are steadfast and have tenure within all of our institutions. We partner with them quite extensively, especially those at our flagship university, UConn, also a Central Connecticut State University, University of Hartford, and many others across that ecosystem. Particularly, we have programs of which we are supporting and or leading that are funded by federal agencies through the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, and Department of Commerce. So in all of these things, and for the last 2 years, the organization that CCAT has become is very symbiotic in technology and talent and training. So it's very much a part of our DNA, which has always been there for 2 decades, but now we have the facilities and the team erected to be able to do that. So your point is well taken, and we're working on it.
Okay, so just, I don't want to It's not a subsequent question. The clarification of where physically the locations are of your and how many people are deployed at each of the facilities. That would be helpful, more or less.
All based in East Hartford, Connecticut. So at our Picken location, that is headquarters, and that's where we have the largest team, as well as our executive offices. The Advanced Technology Center on the RTX campus has about over a dozen engineers and technologists, and our smaller team located at Goodwin University, where the Advanced Composites Technology Center is located, has 3 individuals on our staff.
Okay, thank you. I'll entertain questions from the committee. Co-chair, would you have?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Ron, welcome. And Jackie, welcome back. This committee did a lot of work with CCAT and other parties talking about preparing our small manufacturers for this transition to digital-based manufacturing. So for the benefit of my colleagues who are, I think maybe Representative Buckby was with us at that point, maybe Representative Garvey. But anyway, that was very important work and quite frankly, just a small piece of this entire conversation. And parenthetically, I'll just say, I think today is a better day for you to be here than our manufacturing caucus, because quite frankly, kind of that was the floodgates and the rush. And so now you have, I think, an important time that is due CCAT and all of its accomplishments. So if you could just frame our understanding for my colleagues on the Commerce Committee, what CCAT is. You are not a state agency, but your funding comes on a number of levels, some of which I guess I'm more concerned about than others. You have that federal line item, you've got the state, and then I think you probably have income from private sector. So can you just basically give us a summary on that first?
Yeah, CCAT was established again over 20 years ago as a non-for-profit. There were several centers at the time stood up around the country in various parts of the country, all basically in place because of the offshoring of jobs in technology. So here we are 20 plus years later talking about jobs and technology. So it's pretty interesting. We are a fully independent company. We have to be a sustainable, growing company. We do get state funding to run programs and such in various assistance. We do leverage that with federal programs. So these are our competitive things. We have to go out and win these. We have to be doing the right work for the right federal entity. This is not funding that just comes our way. So the team has to be sharp and has to be advanced and has to be on top of their game all the time. The Digital Thread Lab, the Talent and Training Accelerator, for instance, was all federal money, but it is a testament to what you have done. We've been using this as a platform to build off of and be able to leverage what's been done here in Connecticut beyond our borders to expose others to what's going on in the state. And now it's paying dividends back in. We are training people from outside the state coming in here. So staying in hotels, they're going to restaurants. We are working on programs. We have a team today that from out of state that's at CCAT. So we have to run a business the right way. And we do then look at commercial work at times. And these are areas that are typically specialized with the type of team and the type of equipment we have. So yes, we look at various funding revenue streams for those sort of things, but we are an independent organization, but obviously very, very well tied to Connecticut and our ecosystem here.
Thanks. That's very helpful, Ron. And I should just kind of premise this with the fact that you come with a wealth of experience with regard to government operations, having formerly yourself been the commissioner of economic development in the state of Connecticut. So it kind of all comes around, and we are grateful to have your leadership here. So if you had to just roughly kind of summarize your revenue side, your budget, what percentage would you say is federal, what percentage is state, and what is private?
The percentages differ. It's hard to say we're going to land on any one area. Sometimes you have to look in the rearview mirror because the federal contracts can be quite sizable. They're large, they're multi-year contracts, especially the ones coming from the Department of Defense. Those involving the Navy right now, when you think about the SIB, which is a submarine industrial base, you'll hear more about that, which is now the MIB, the Maritime Industrial Base. These are terms you should familiarize yourself with because they are incredibly meaningful to Connecticut, and they will be for the decades ahead. It involves sustainment of the existing submarine fleet. It involves the new Columbia class submarine, all being designed for the most part in New London, Connecticut, out of Electric Boat's research and engineering facility. The supply chain enhancements that need to occur, we're talking about a 2 to 3x additional increase in productivity that needs to come out of the existing supply chain, in addition to attracting new companies into the supply chain. One of the greatest opportunities to me right now, and you mentioned my background in economic development, it gets me really jazzed up because right now, Connecticut's in a position from the digital standpoint, because of the nature of the work we do. And that digital standpoint also trickles over to bioscience, to medical device, to healthcare, to insurance. Everything this state is doing, the industries that are key, involve digital advancement. And of course, AI, quantum computing, it's tremendously important to us. So we're very much structured around aerospace. That is still very, very important to us. And Connecticut is home to not home, but has 5 of the largest aerospace companies in the world. 5 of them have big locations in Connecticut. So we want to continue to seize on that opportunity. And how does the future warfighter work in a very digital environment, and certainly unmanned vehicles, drone environments? These are huge opportunities to advance technology in Connecticut. So for CCAT, you could probably at one time say, well, we're heavier on federal, maybe 60% federal, and then it goes down to maybe 30% state. But it's very difficult. I don't want to be quoted on a number because 1 or 2 federal contracts can skew things in quite a different way.
And that's exactly the nature of my question. And so moving on, in the environment that we are currently in, have you any indication of changes with regard to the support of some of these programs, which, by the way, are critical to, the top of the pyramid in the manufacturing organization, if you will, the state of Connecticut? And then how they go, so goes all of the supply chain.
Yeah, I mean, again, these are things actually you've had your eye on for quite a few years. The way you worked on that Industry 4.0 task force, there's things that have been put in place. Certainly the Office of Chief Manufacturing Officer, the power behind that and the leverage has put Connecticut in a very, very advantageous position. We travel extensively. We need to visit partners around the country, certainly our time in DC. And when you look at what's being focused on, again, digital technologies, digital advancement, these play perfectly well into Connecticut's ecosystem, right? We may not be building large structures, though we do launch a submarine or 2 every year. We are in precision type work, very, very high value work. And a lot of the R&D and design that goes on is originating from Connecticut. And that will play even a greater role as you look at the involvement with the Australian government, with the UK government, as it comes to AUKUS. Our supply chain is the envy of the world. I mean, it is. We have our faults. We need to get better on the workforce side and work harder on the training and university engagement. Everybody is, though, doing the right thing, right? I mean, they've got their eye on the ball. It doesn't, I'm not overly concerned with it because I don't see a lot in our blind spot, right? We know where we have issues. We know where we need to address issues. The Governor's Workforce Council, the schools, the K through 12, the pathways. There's some incredible talent throughout the state focused on these things. CCAT gets to do our part and excel because so many others are doing theirs. It is really an amazing partnership and ecosystem we have here in Connecticut.
And then I am concerned about the fact that, for example, EB has stopped hiring when they had previously talked about, thousands of open jobs in the workforce.
I do not in any way, shape, or form want to speak for EB. I was at a briefing yesterday, however, with Mark Ray was there with the new president, and their hiring is very, very substantial again this year. And they are doing an incredible job throughout the maritime industrial base, but certainly the SIB to supplier development programs. They are supporting the supply chain. They are supporting workforce programs. Certainly what's going on in EWIB, the Eastern Workforce, and with the other boards. They are hugely committed to the state, and a big ramp up is coming. You're talking about 1.4 submarines a year that we need to be launching 3 submarines a year plus sustainment by 2030. This is the time we can capture work and advance supply chain. This is generational what's going on right now. So it's really important to keep our eye on the ball.
And to sustain what we started and not blink. Can you just comment on SBIR, talk about old conversations, STTR? These are research grant programs that help to elevate, scale our manufacturing sector, and but they are very technical in nature in terms of manufacturers being able to access them. And our concern has been that we in the state of Connecticut have not had an opportunity or have not availed ourselves amply to them. Yes, go ahead, Jack.
Thank you, Senator Hartley. It's been a few years since I even understood what a SIBR or an STTR was. As a former research scientist, I got really excited when I came to CCAT because we were named on SBIR.gov as one of the resources for companies across the country. So I was also part of the team that was working to establish more of our clout across the national ecosystem with respect to how many federal awards that we can have. So in partnership with other entities across the state, I know that work is still of high importance, and I particularly can speak for CCAT because we are still having conversations with companies, small businesses across the state of Connecticut, as well as others. So in some small way, CCAT can help companies on phase 1, phase 2, and ultimately phase 3, SBIR, STTR, in partnership with other universities as well. So although Connecticut is in our name, and we're bringing all of this richness to our state, we're able to really help on a more national level. So I am equally still very passionate about how we as Connecticut can elevate our SBIR funding. And it's, again, goes back to the opportunities and awareness. So every time that I have an ample audience, I'm making it known that CCAT and our other partners in the university system are resources to help small businesses with that federal funding.
Thanks, Jackie. So then how have we done in the last 24 months? Have we moved the needle?
I'd have to get back to you on the data with that, ma'am.
I'd love to see, Ron, one of your, your charts, your pie charts, your, yes.
Jackie actually does the charts. She's really good at them.
Okay.
I'm just saying, one thing to look at as far as leverage, the SBIR and STTR programs are very important, and they have valuable resources. They are challenging though. It's tough to make it through that process. And so what the state has done is, through the Manufacturing Innovation Fund, manufacturers can come. CCAT administers a lot of these programs for Paul Lavoie and the MIF. A lot of companies could come in and get grants up to $250,000 in total for all different types of reasons. You've supplemented that. You've actually provided the stimulus capital to kick off a lot of these things. They need to have 3 employees and a couple. So, there's different criteria, but we're leveraging every dollar state taxpayer money needs to be leveraged as 4 or 5 to 1 more. We've got to keep pushing this up. And I'm keen on it. Yeah, I just like to do it. And it's exciting to how do you leverage these things and really amplify it. But Jackie and her team are really, really experienced when they do get an opportunity to partner in some way to assist with an SBI or STTR. It's something we want to get a part of. And we do need to grow that. We've got to really capture much more of the federal funding. The DoD budget right now is slated at probably a $200 billion increase. That's what's being floated. So, defense in a number of ways will continue to be very key for Connecticut.
So if I might ask, if you could get back to us with whatever that profile looks like, it would be, I think, pretty instructive for the committee, especially in view of, I think, the emphasis that is going to be put on DOD. And then lastly, if I might, Mr. Chair, just one more conversation about how do you see CCAT engaging, supporting, and helping us to scale AI and quantum. We're going to hear about that tomorrow in the governor's budget. Where do you see yourselves in all this?
Thank you for that question. Knowing that Quantum CT is an entity that is deeply rooted here across Yale University and UConn, because now CCAT has our talent training accelerator, Dr. Thompson and myself have been having conversations with those leaders, in particular with the grant, the proposal that's being submitted either later this month, I believe later this month, to continue that. So with artificial intelligence, this is something that our team of engineers and technologists are working with inside our Advanced Technology Center. And again, getting back to the mission focus of us having attention towards small businesses and medium-sized manufacturers, creating these types of solutions that are of low cost, that doesn't necessarily include deep pockets to be able to handle. So with AI and machine learning, we're partnering up with our ecosystem here, particularly with the university professors that are doing this research with us in collaboration. With Quantum CT, we've had conversations about more so the training and the professional development that will follow. So CCAT acts as an integrator and an amplifier, although we don't have wet labs to do chemical analysis or really materials beyond, creating different alloy blends in 3D printing or additive manufacturing. I like to say jokingly that we always say yes and figure out how to do it later, right? We're problem solvers. We make solutions. And particularly as well, our focus is on our manufacturing ecosystem here and making sure that we reduce all barriers to entry for those individuals. So I'm particularly excited with where AI is going and how it can help businesses maintain their competitive edge. And we do that again through partnership. And if I may also, while I have the floor, and thank you so much for all of your time this afternoon, we've talked with companies about new product integration and innovation. So that's where I think we could really leverage federal funding through SBIR and STTR. So I will get you that data back very shortly.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think this all kind of comes together, and I do agree with you, Ron, that kind of this is our sweet spot in our moment. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair.
And just as a follow-up on the financial side, I don't know whether you need to smooth the data over 2-year integrals, but I don't feel like we got an appropriate answer to the state budget versus the federal budget versus the private sector. And I realize they're chunky increments, but I want to understand what the shortfalls might be or what the flows look like for what our roles are going to be going forward. So, if you've got a contract that might be as color as well. If they're 5-year contracts from the feds, the fall off date, what's the replacement period? Try to figure out how you're managing your budget, because you're basically fishing for whales, and you hit and miss, and the volatility of that on your income stream is important to me.
Yeah.
So I want to know that we can maintain the entity, and I want to make sure that if you're coming to us with an ask, we're prepared in advance, right?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
I think I'll start with Representative Buckby and then on to Representative Vale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for coming out. This is, as a good chair mentioned too, this is kind of fun to get back into this piece of this. It's been a couple of years since I've been on Commerce, so this is kind of nice. I wanted to follow up on the initial comments about getting the word out, and the good chair mentioned about more digital footprint from us, let's say. Have you done any like roadshows across the state working with small manufacturers? Like for Western Connecticut, I don't know if you know, these guys have heard 1,000 times. I represent New Milford, the best town in the USA. We've got some great manufacturing going on in Western Connecticut, and I'd love to see more of how that is on the roadshow. And you have outstanding support across this table to help you get into some of those too. Is that something you've tried to do or pushing to do?
Yeah, absolutely. We do this all over the state. We do have some people actually charged with this. So we have actually called roadshows in career pathways. So they are in all different parts of the state. We have events coming up. I think that point of sharing this with you so you know when the events are, we typically do them in tandem. So it's us along with Constep and Ready CT. We try to make sure we partner on these to have the largest draw. But we do have those scheduled out and would certainly like to give you those, as well as tremendous training videos and some really kind of exciting videos that anybody could just put up and show. They're actually quite cool. So yeah, we can share those with you.
Yeah, I think the videos are great. I think but getting us involved
Yeah.
too on that and coming to the communities and introducing to some of the organizations that may not know who you are in that spot. I just think it's kind of funny that we talk about this incredible digital footprint and the opportunity that's there, yet the thought process goes back to Michael Scott with a gift basket. Um, the old school, come to your town, come to your face and, hey, we're here. This is what we offer. I think that'd be critical to see, especially we're looking at your website. Looking at the large corporations that are on there, it all represents as the logos move by, it's all large corporations, and we don't see enough of the small, maybe more of the small businesses that you're talking about that are in there. Be great to see more of that within. So, just my 2 cents with it. Thank you so much for coming out. This is great to see, and thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Representative Vale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, just to follow up on both chairs' question about funding. I'm kind of a numbers guy, more brass tacks and direct. I think you mentioned maybe it was roughly around 30% state, 60% federal. So that leaves 10% maybe private. And maybe that's a moving target, moving forward, but you obviously, maybe you could share with us what those numbers were for the previous two budgets. That those numbers should be concrete, and maybe we can at least have those ideas of what that percentage was. So we have some type of idea on how that works. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? I want to thank you very much for your testimony. Oh, hold on 1 second, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and my apologies. No, so Ron and Jackie, I just want to ask you, knowing where we are, knowing some of our pain points, knowing our opportunities, what is it on this side of the room we could and should be doing?
Well, I just have to stick to kind of the CCAT answer, right? I mean, there's a lot. Well, I know you hear about things with affordable housing and last mile transportation, all those kind of things, and I know there's wonderful work being done on those things. But the awareness side for companies and making sure that as you look at legislation, how is that impacting, especially the smaller companies? I mean, it's a twofold thing. We understand that these larger companies can make various choices. So we have to continue to make this a very attractive place. Again, during this digital time, we've just been talking about digital. So the research, the advancement, we want that to be done here in Connecticut. We'd like things built here in Connecticut as well, although some of that may have to be built in different facilities because they're closer to the customers. But we want to own the design, the files, the research. We want to own these areas because they're incredibly valuable and they're long tail. They're very sticky. So, things that can really some way incent or make sure that we understand the impact on companies, particularly from those that are investing in advancing technology to become more efficient and improve, especially on the digital side. And then I know you get hit with many, many other things about what people want you to focus on from another standpoint, but that would be from CCAT standpoint.
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm glad to hear you say it. And, we heard some of our colleagues talk about, that next tier down, those middle manufacturers and those small manufacturers, that supply chain, and getting them up to speed. Okay, 4.0, that's kind of in the rear view mirror. That was the big thing we talked about. I don't know, was it just 2 years ago? But anyhow, getting those smaller, even mom and pop manufacturers to make the bar in terms of the digital technology that the big, defense contractors are going to require. They will no longer be able to even compete if they are not of a certain credential. And that's so important. And I mean, I'm from the Naugatuck Valley, and up and down, that Route 8 corridor. That's what it is. It's all those small, second and sometimes third generation manufacturers. And, they're wearing a lot of hats, and a lot of times they don't have that long view.
Yeah, I think we'd certainly like to leave you with what we talk about at CCAT a lot. We're the Connecticut Center for Advanced Technology, but humbly, there's many times we're not advancing technology. We're trying to advance technology in a business. So we, as Jackie said, we meet people, where they are. So even though I don't want you to say we're throwing out Industry 4.0, it's just how we address these companies. And many times it's saying, you're using a piece of software. You don't need to invest. We don't want you to buy anything new. We want you to take that software because you're using it in second gear. We can show you how to use that in fifth gear. We want you to turbocharge what you've got. So the first thing we do is say, how do we improve with the existing legacy types of equipment and software? We can drive process out sometimes by 80%. So we're saving them labor, we're saving them energy on, per output. That's what's important. That's what we're doing for businesses. So we're advancing them without necessarily at all, or very often saying, well, you got to go invest a ton of money. They don't have it. They need to be able to do things with what they've got. And that's the beauty part of the CCAT team. They're able to look at what these companies have, go in even sometimes on the machine and say, we're going to show you how to program this thing better. And all of a sudden their outputs are better. The quality goes up. Those things make a huge difference to the type of companies, Senator Hartley, you're referring to.
Yeah, totally. And so trying to reach, we're a small state, but the fact of the matter is, we've got a lot of silos. And so reaching into the manufacturing mid and small, factories or manufacturers, do you work with the manufacturers collaborative, that umbrella organization that kind of brought together all of the different regional manufacturing associations to try to get the word out so people understand and know, and they can pick up the phone and say, hey, we might need a conversation here?
Yeah, yes. Someone from the CCAT team, I don't know if it's every event, but it's probably close to it. That, the chamber breakfasts, the association breakfasts, the meetings, we're at everywhere we possibly can be. So yes, we do play an active role, even with the regional sector partnerships. We are a resource for all of them. And boy, you can't talk it up enough. That's the reality. So frankly, getting things to you folks to be able to do that within your districts and areas, frankly, can be very helpful.
Well, arm us and
You're welcome. Seeing no further questions, I believe we're standing forward with our esteemed representative.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Senator, and ranking members. So this is my first time in front of the Commerce Committee. I've tried to get on the committee before. I've requested it and I've been denied for some reason. I think that it was an inside job.
It's a very exclusive committee.
That's what I've heard. I was also
We'll
told
consider it in the future.
I was also told not to come off angry today, even though I may have written my testimony when I was slightly annoyed. I want to let you know that I do have a fun heart and I'm not always aggravated. So I'm going to read a little bit because I want to first start off by saying how I appreciate this committee and the fact that you're even willing to explore some of the challenges and some of the industries in Connecticut. The hospitality industry, which I am a part of, I'm an owner, I'm a chef by trade, I'm a classically trained chef. I've been in this business my entire life. Employs 150,000 people. For years, we were the only growing industry in this state. We provide so many people with opportunity, and we provide millions and millions, if not billions of dollars in tax revenue to the state of Connecticut. So we are starting to have our challenges. A lot of the regulatory stuff and a lot of the forced cost increases that have been impaled upon us by government are starting to add up. And you're starting to see repercussions throughout the industry. Just look at the sales tax receipts. since last summer. We are starting to see a decline. People are stopping to spend. Now, the budget's doing okay because the financial markets are doing okay, but some of your Main Street businesses are starting to see a hurt. So I'll go through my testimony a little bit. I'll try not to read, but I wanted to stay on track. But I wanted to let you know how appreciative I am for at least the opportunity to talk today, okay? Like I said, my name is Dave Ritigliano. I am a state representative for the 123rd District of Trumbull. I'm also a proprietor of the SBC Restaurant Group. We've been in business since 1996. We employ hundreds of people. We have collected tens of thousands, if not millions of dollars worth in taxes throughout our career. I'm here to highlight the mounting challenges threatening our state's hospitality industry. The pandemic dealt a severe blow to restaurants, and we continue to face unprecedented pressures from labor shortages, inflation, the ever-expanding regulatory environment. And although I am appreciative of the committee and its willingness to listen to our issues, we are here because there are other committees with cognizance over certain issues that we are dealing with that are unwilling to even have a conversation. We find that to be fundamentally unfair. So one of our most significant challenges we face for inflationary impacts in labor costs and mandates, particularly the minimum wage. Now, listen, we don't pay anybody the minimum wage. We haven't paid the minimum wage in my particular business outside of an entry-level host or a bus person in 20 plus years. It just doesn't happen. Our restaurants are in different markets. But let me tell you what happens when they do raise the minimum wage. Every employee I have automatically asks for an increase. It inflates the labor cost. If the chef behind the line knew that the host up front got $1, he's like, where's my dollar? It's almost justified. You understand what they're asking for, but this is how it happens. So we're not saying that we're a minimum wage business because we're really not, but it does drive up the cost for everything. Given the restaurant industry's notoriously slim profit margin, which now it stands about 3 to 5%, rising payroll costs force us to raise menu prices, directly fueling food service inflation. This results in reduced customer spending and shifting dining habits. If you look out there in the restaurant world, people are making decisions all the time. It's getting expensive to go out to a full serve restaurant. So you see the explosion of quick serve. Just look what's opening up in your towns and where you are, what type of restaurants are opening up. It's mainly quick serve or counter service restaurants that are not as employee or labor intensive as other models. The government is picking winners and losers. And once again, the large operations are winning. So you'd think that these increases were really affecting the big people, the big companies. They're not. They're the ones that can afford it the most. They can afford the technology the fastest. They can adapt. They can reduce labor. They can reduce the size of things. They do a lot of things that small businesses can't do. So when we raise these costs, thinking that we're helping people, really you're helping the exact companies you were thought needed to pay more. Additionally, increases in payroll costs frequently result in cutbacks to staffing. If you notice, most restaurants adjust. Positions that were once entry-level opportunities for young workers are disappearing, and restaurants move to a more automated flow chart. Reduced staffing also impacts customer service, quality, eroding dining experience, and the loyalty that patrons have come to expect. We've also found that by not hiring these teenagers, or whatever you want to call them, that don't know anything, and we start to teach them, it's our future managers, chefs. They're not there. Our pipeline is declining because we're losing the ability to hire some of these young people. We observed that some employees, this also happens in our industry, that some employees limit their work hours to avoid jeopardizing a government subsidy. We have seen that for certain employees that maybe have a lower wage, they'll only work to a certain point. We have many employees that ask for a raise and then they ask for an additional day off because they'll take the raise, but they have to keep their income at a certain level. Has the government even stopped for a second to see if the roles, the subsidy roles, people that we help in our welfare system, has it decreased as the minimum wage and the labor costs have gone up? I don't know the answer, but nobody's asking the question. We're asking that for you to ask that question. Are we actually helping people, or are they just reducing their hours so that they don't lose whatever subsidy we're giving? And that goes into a whole nother conversations about benefit cliffs that I know Representative Keat is very interested in. I'm happy to have that conversation with her. Then we have regulatory burdens. For most employees, it was a difficult, believe it or not, to take a 0.5% of their income. And this resulted in an immediate ask for a wage increase to make up for the part we took away. Also, there's a 3% retirement that nobody asked for, a plan nobody's looking for. Once they started taking that out of the employee's paycheck, they asked us to stop it immediately. And then they wanted to make up for the 3%, or they wanted a 3% increase to make up for whatever was getting taken out of their check. We are hoping that we could take a pause for a moment to gauge whether the amount of people are actually being helped that we want to. Then there's the regulatory burden. For most employees, that's where I was, I'm sorry. Regulatory thing. So this is what's prompted my writing this, and I'll stop reading, I guess. I'm sitting there on Saturday night, and I get an email. It's from the Restaurant Association. Food waste. Oh, okay. We don't have a ton of waste, but we have waste. Food waste. There's 3 links in there. I gotta count my garbage. I don't know how to weigh my garbage. What are you talking about? The government now wants me to figure out if I have enough garbage to have a system where I have to send it to a certain place so they can compost it. It's food. There's nothing that degenerates faster than food. It's literally going to turn to dust. I read through it. It is incalculable to me how I'm supposed to weigh my garbage, right? So, and then I'm thinking, I have 3 restaurants that I share a dumpster with the entire plaza. One of them's got a trash compactor. We all use it. I'm like, how does this work? How do we figure out what's in that dumpster, and whether or not this new mandate applies to me? Then there's the CO2 detector. I'm not talking about the bad carbon monoxide. Which is the one that kills you? Dioxide or monoxide? Help me out. Monoxide kills you. So we have carbon dioxide detectors. This is CO2, the fizzy stuff in beer and soda. So the state mandated that we have to install these detectors, which don't work, and they're provided by the most predatory company we do business with, of course, for a monthly fee. And they can't answer the question, has there been one injury from carbonation in the state of Connecticut ever? Well, the answer is no. They won't tell me the answer is no, but I can tell you the answer is no, because they won't say, yes, one person has been hurt. And then, sillily, the restaurant industry, we tried to adopt the model food code. We did it years ago. The idea was that we would go with the federal model food code, and that would help us with our local health department, some of which had erroneous regulations, and they were looking at the wrong stuff. They spent more time with a chip tile than they did with the temperature of the food. So we thought the model food code was a good idea. Well, I'm here to tell you, this is one of the bigger mistakes we've ever made. The model food code is 20,000 pages. The health department code we came from was 20. So we did it to ourselves, but something has to change. It's come with the ability for health departments now, after they fail you, they could charge you for the reinspection. So believe it or not, there's a perverse incentive to fail you so they can come back and get compensated for the reinspection. It is causing havoc throughout the industry. You see it in the newspaper. They print it all the time about a priority violation and all that other stuff. And then we want to talk about the sales tax issue. I, as an operator of a business in the state of Connecticut, have the distinct pleasure to be required to collect the state's sales tax. And for that, I'm charged to do it. I pay the credit card fees on the state's money. If I make a mistake, I'm subject to sanction, arrest, and imprisonment. This is the most unfair thing you've ever seen. The state is unjustly enriched to the tune of about $90 million a year, probably more, from just the fees that we pay on the credit cards to collect the state tax. Could anything be more unfair? So I recommend to the committee, if we could help as a legislator, pause or adjust the minimum wage formula. When the formula for the yearly minimum wage increase was instituted, they thought it would be anywhere between 12 and 20 cents per year. Kind of manageable, something that we could look forward to. It's been 60 plus cents the first 2 years that we've used the formula. Regulatory stabilization, implement a moratorium on new regulation and provide a grace period for businesses to adapt. Sales tax reform, let the state pay to collect its own money. I don't know why we're subject to it. It's very unfair. Other states have other systems where they give you a tax credit for collecting the state's money. And then employee relationship reform. So when you come up with some of these rules like paid sick days and all this other stuff, the state has a habit of assuming that every relationship between an employee and an employer is a negative one. It's not always the case. You know, these horror stories from 50, 80 years ago just aren't true. Most employers appreciate their employees, take care of them, do whatever they can to keep them and retain them because it's hard to find people. So I want to thank you for your time. I know I talk fast. And I know I'm a slightly aggravated. I know it's not all you, this committee that did a lot of the things that I'm talking about, but you're the Commerce Committee. I am involved in commerce. I buy things, I sell things. I do millions of dollars worth of business. I collect taxes. I am an asset to the state of Connecticut. And for that, I thank you for your time.
Wow.
There was more, but I left some out for you, Representative.
For that, I want to thank
It's been
you
a tough few
very
years.
much. You know, Representative, we've spoken many times. I started my career in a retail store, and then I spent 9 years waiting tables in the restaurant industry through college and graduate school. So I think I hear all the complaints. I'm trying to put my arm around them about what the resolution or solutions are, but I'll start off with the opening comment, which is, or the thing that resonated most with me, is that the regulatory burden and framework where we think we could be lifting people up could be driving us into more institutionalized sales. And I'll translate that into more chains, more large nationwide federalized franchises. And I know for a fact that the restaurant business, it's a sign of entrepreneurship. There's a lot of new owners. That whole food chain of apprenticeships that works in the restaurant business is an incredible opportunity for us. The only thing that I've sat with on commerce, and I don't think it was directly in commerce, was when we were looking to open up liquor sales in supermarkets. And my thought on that was in strong opposition because there's about 3 or 4 supermarket chains. A lot of them are located out of state. And the revenue stream, once that goes directly to them versus all the small package stores and their entrepreneurial effort. So I'm very sympathetic to what you're talking about, which is the entrepreneurial effort and trying to see what we can do. And at the same time, I'm, the issues of inflation and life inflation and salaries, it's a very complicated issue. But I think what I walk away with is a very important message of make sure you're not doing too much harm when you're trying to regulate, making sure that the regulations are fair, and make sure you're not driving industry, and particularly this type of entrepreneur, into a consolidation where people lose out. I mean, if you're not owning 4 restaurants and you're working in a franchise, guaranteed you're making less money. You're not investing in the little leagues. You're not investing in the community. You're sending it to corporate headquarters in Chicago or Texas. And it's not a business model I like.
Our industry is remarkable. I am a lower middle class kid from Waterbury who took out student loans to go to culinary school. And I end up in my own business for the past 30 years. So there are so many stories just like mine. We're one of the few industries where this actually happens. And really, it's because you're creative and you work hard. If people like what you make, they come and they buy it. And if you work hard enough, you'll do okay. It's still true in our industry. So yes, I agree with you. As we corporatize it, we sort of take away some of the best parts of it.
Thank you. Any questions from the co-chair?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Yeah, and someday we should do a sampling.
Anytime.
Okay. See, that's how you further incentivize us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See that? Well, you live in Greenwich. It's very fancy down there. It's a
Uh,
whole different world.
Recommended Brussels sprouts.
Oh, the Brussels sprouts. Okay, we've got a
Yeah, the Brussels
recommendation
sprouts.
right away.
Yeah.
So help us to kind of focus this picture, Representative. How do we compare with our surrounding states?
Well, currently now Connecticut has the third largest highest minimum wage in the country. We went from sort of middle of the road for a long time to we're the third highest with no end in sight. The problem is, Senator, there's no end in sight. We're on this, we've adopted this formula, which they thought would be one thing. It's turning out to be another thing. It's not 10, 15, 20 cents a year. It's been $1.20 in 2 years. And that's going to keep going with nobody predicted, COVID and the massive inflation over the past 4 years that would drive up these indicators that we use to raise it.
No, no one could have predicted that. And, we live, quite frankly, with the results of all of that on many fronts. I mean, we're going to see a budget tomorrow, and you're going to hear from people in your district and otherwise, saying that they've been cut when in fact, as the old argument went last year, I'll use higher ed as example, where we, and it came from the executive's office, we've increased your funding, but yeah, there was a gap, and both narratives were true, and it was all about the federal money, which we cannot supplant. We never intended to, but people, organizations build that in ways that maybe were not ideal. So yeah, it's this whole new world, and we deal with it on a lot of fronts, with the dearth of actual feet on the street, of employee remote work, where which totally affects your industry. So there's so many holes in the dike here, and so help us out. Yeah, we're the Commerce Committee,
Right.
And it is about growing the commerce and the economy of the state of Connecticut. And you hit a lot of things. The governor, in his opening remarks to us, specifically the Commerce Committee, talked about regulatory burden. What's the priority list from the seat you're in terms of what we need to focus on and refine?
So what's beauty about our business, our industry, is we always come up here and our first thing out of our mouth is, hey, just leave us alone. We're doing good. We're trying to do the best we can. I promise you we'll do the right thing. What's happened over the past few years is the speed of change. The amount of regulation and business interruption that's happened over the past 5, 6, 7 years has been incredible. Nobody would have predicted in 2025 that a large percentage of our business right now, just as an example, would be for some delivery service, right? That was a pandemic, an offshoot of the pandemic, that takes up to 30% of the sale and now accounts for a lot of your sales. And they process your credit cards and they hold your money. So many people needed that Uber Eats to survive during the pandemic. But now it's like you sit there and you have to make a decision. Am I keeping this? Is this worth it for me? Am I better off with somebody inside the restaurant? And, we see that our traffic has slowed, so we keep it. And so I don't know if that specifically answers your question. I think the specific answer, Senator, would be it's time to take it off the gas a little bit. We've had enough. We need time to adjust. It's one after another after another. Paid family leave and paid sick days and forced retirement, and now the garbage, you name it. And they've talked to the restaurant business about doing it. We're already the biggest recycler in the state of Connecticut. You made the bottom bill 10%. I mean, 10 cents. That's double what it was before. Most restaurants absorb that because it's too hard and dirty to actually do the returns. I know this is off topic, but I mean, it's gross. We don't leave those bottles inside the restaurants full of sugar and bugs, and they got to go. So we put them in the recycling bin, or we hope somebody comes by and takes them and uses them for their own. What I'm just telling you is that there's been a cost escalator. If you add in the inflationary nature of COVID, our food costs have exploded, our labor costs have exploded. You know how everybody complained about their public benefit charge? Right. Last summer, we all got the public benefit charge that the whole world's screaming about. Well, we did the calculation. We went out for the 10 months, $70,000 for my company in additional fees for 10 months. Could you imagine what that's like for everybody else? So I'm just telling you, it's a compound. It's been a compounding. I can't tell you. I mean, I could sit here and probably tell you all the things I'd like you to get rid of, but we first have to stop by stopping new stuff.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Bertolano. But can I just kind of go back to my first question? So how do we compare to our surrounding neighbors with regard to this sector?
You know, I might not be the best one to answer that.
Okay.
Because I worry about my own business and I worry about the state of Connecticut.
Okay.
I know it's more, I know our electric rates are probably the highest in the country. Our gas rates are super high for the area. Our minimum wage now is third highest in the country. You know,
Yep.
we passed a HUD tax, a hut tax a few years ago. So now we have a truck tax. There's not one thing in a restaurant that didn't come here on a truck. And so that just made the cost go up. So like I said, it's a lot of things over a long period of time.
Thank you very much for this very full commentary. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Representative Vale?
You better not, Bill. I'll tell you.
Thank you. Well, you know, there's no way I'm gonna miss this opportunity. You were kind of rough on me when I first started, so I gotta get some revenge. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm gonna be
I was
nice.
ranking on.
We're on the
list.
same
Yeah,
page
yeah.
on this issue, so we're good. Again, when I first started in 2015, and we were on the labor committee together, and we talked about a lot of this stuff. The minimum wage was 10.10.
Yeah.
So just in my time here in the legislature, it's increased over 60%. That's pretty substantial. It makes it tough. So collectively, with all these things you're talking about, how much have you had to increase your prices? How many less staff are you working with because of this? And how much have you lost in the volume of business?
So it's good questions. I'll give you, I have specifics on some and anecdotal on others, right? Our menu prices, we've been adjusting. We resisted. I have to be honest with you. We kept thinking that things would change or things would. So we do a little bit every time, but we've gone up significantly over the past 2 years where we just couldn't take it anymore. Most of that was food inflation and the price of everything. During COVID, the top line, everything top line got expensive, but that really wasn't what hurt. Everything that you use to cook got expensive. You know, the oil you fry French fries in doubled over. It makes no sense. How we handled the labor increase is that we sort of got rid of some of the certain positions. You know how you go in a restaurant and you see bus people or food runners, or you know, you have 2 hosts instead of 1. That's where we cut it, because at $16 an hour, we figure, you know, we could use an extra server or add a cook and be more productive than really teaching these young kids. So we did that. Our volume was not declining up until 2024. 2024 is we've started to see mid-year, right around the time where people's electric bills went through the roof. My personal company, I can't speak for every restaurant. It's not true for everybody. We started seeing foot traffic decline and our top line revenue decline. So
And you have less employees now than you did.
yeah, most certainly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have definitely less employees than before. Pre-COVID, we had 360. We lost 2 restaurants during COVID, one directly from COVID. We had one in an inner city of Norwalk, and our foot traffic went down 90% in 2 days, and 6 months later, we were gone. And then we had another restaurant we closed last summer that got hurt during COVID, but it took a few years for it to realize itself that it wasn't coming back. So COVID was particularly destructive. I know that some other people use it for opportunity, but for where we were, it was painful. Nobody was going to go run down to Sono and grab takeout, you know, stuff like that.
So you have less employees and higher prices.
Less employees, higher price. I have less establishments too, by the way. So
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Figured I have to take an opportunity as well. This is, you know, rarefied air, like Representative Vale had mentioned, to give a hard time. No, I actually, looking at your testimony and hearing what you've had to say, this really steps through a lot of different legislation throughout the building for this year. Do you have or can you get a full list of the different pieces of legislation that are existing that can really make an impact on those things you're asking for?
I'll be gentle. If we could get a public hearing on any bill that we've proposed in certain committees, we could at least have a conversation. Your committee, to your credit, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, at least had the forum where some of us can get up here and talk about maybe some of the challenges we're having. There's plenty of legislation out there, but some are unwilling to talk about it.
I think the openness to include this conversation in today's events as well, I think is a great sign from the chairs and our rankings to take a step in recognizing the issue. And I for one appreciate you mentioning more of the detail, because I have friends who own restaurants and are talking about how this is tough, that's tough, and you start putting the actual metrics together and how much it's jumped and changed in the last 5-6 years. I think it is something that we really I think we're obligated to do something with it, as far as commerce. I don't want to speak on behalf of anyone, but I think that's something that we really should certainly take a look at, uh, for something that we all use. Everybody on this side of the table as well utilizes restaurants on a pretty regular basis, and I appreciate your plethora of words for the day.
Oh, so I talk too much? No. So I appreciate you saying that. If one thing comes from this opportunity that you were kind enough to give me, is that I don't understand why other committees aren't willing to at least have, nobody's telling you to vote for anything, but can we at least have a conversation? Can we at least bring in some witnesses? Can we make our case? Listen, maybe we change a mind. Maybe it sparks a conversation where we could do a little good and help some of these people get jobs, right? Ultimately, outside of the Commerce Committee today, we haven't had one pro-business bill, or I should mark my words, we haven't had a bill that we've proposed, raised in a committee. So I appreciate that very much so.
Mild travesty, but thank you for your testimony, and thank you, chairs, for the opportunity.
Yeah, you can always count on the Commerce Committee to bring forward issues of concern to the community for economic growth. The bottom line, I think, and I've told people on both sides of the aisle that I pride myself in the last 2 years that I've been on commerce. And I think the votes, and I don't know what the Senate does, but the House, I know the votes were about 140 on average on the bills. And we captured the full bell-shaped curve on political ideology. And it's because it's a pro-business. We have to figure, the minimum wage is a complex issue, we need to lift all boats, and we need to lift people's economic aspirations and opportunity and the growth of the economy. So I wrestle with that when I understand what the impetus that it provides at the retail level and at the restaurants, and the risks that it drives us into chains. And frankly, entrepreneurship is the cornerstone of what I personally view. And entrepreneurship in my state is important. I don't like wiring money, whether it's retail, whether it's for cars that do their sales and are located in places like Texas. I don't like dealing with a business that doesn't reinvest in my community, which is why sometimes the car distributors, I'm supportive of the business model where some of the money is reinvested in our community. So everything I can do to help on behalf of myself and with the support of the committee, you can count on us. So
I appreciate that, Mr.
I want to
Chair.
thank you for your testimony.
And sometimes you could be for raising the minimum wage. It's the speed of the increases. It's the speed that we're at, the pace we're at, and there's no end in sight. We'll be at $20 before you know it.
Listen, I want to thank you for your testimony. Any other questions? With
Mr.
no
Chair?
further ado,
Mis-
you're welcome.
Mr. Chair?
Sorry. Our illustrious ranking senator, Henry.
Thank you. Dave, thanks for testifying. I think you hit on a lot of challenges of not only your industry, but many businesses, particularly a lot of mom and pops that are out there and the struggles that they have day in and day out with some of the statutes that come out of this building here. Can you just, I'm sure that you probably heard the governor's opening day speech, and he mentioned about, he sort of charged our committee, the Commerce Committee, to identify obstacles that are sort of shackling us regarding economic growth, in particular, some mandates or just statutes perhaps. But you mentioned a few here. In your opinion, what should we be focused on? Do you have any ideas of some of these regulations that we should be removing?
Well, listen, regulation tamps down a lot of industry. Access to capital is always an industry, and the high cost of doing business here in Connecticut. So, you know, I don't know exactly what the purview of the Commerce Committee is, other than promoting business in the state of Connecticut and full employment, which I fully support. I believe everybody should have a job and an opportunity to do better. But for years, Connecticut didn't just suffer from high regulations and high costs; it suffered from a bad reputation. I think we've sort of made strides over that over the past few years. We were always the butt of the joke, or the punchline to every joke that was ever told about a state's economy, and I'm hoping that we can get past that. So if we could start there, where people don't look at their interactions with their local and state government with dread, I think that might be a good thing.
Uh, you know, I heard you talk about the jobs that you eliminated, and it's unfortunate. You know, those are entry-level jobs. You expose our youth to, you know, what it's like to work in a restaurant, and some of them get bit by that, because I'm a firm believer it's got to be in your blood. It's like somewhat like playing golf. You get bit by it, and you play golf forever. But you know, it's unfortunate that you know, there are jobs that are lost because of some of these burdens that we place on businesses. So thank you for testifying. It's a good eye opener for everybody.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. I believe next up we have Scott Dolch, the Restaurant Association. Actually, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Connecticut Restaurant Association. I'll give you your honest due there. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Scott Dolch, President and CEO of the Connecticut Restaurant Association. Hopefully for timing for you guys, I know there was 2 other speakers, but I actually, you know, as I talked to both chairs just about, you know, coming in today, and actually didn't even know Representative Tigliano was going to present, which I appreciate that he did. But also being able to bring in a couple of board members, one right here. Look at that, I have a seat and everything. I want to bring a couple board members in as well to introduce themselves. They can speak directly to the industry, how it's impacting them. Also, so you guys know, representing the Restaurant Association, it isn't just restaurants, private events and caterers. So to my left, I have Doug Palestena. So Doug, you can introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Doug Palestena. I am the owner-operator of the Amber Colonnade in Danbury, and representing Buckby. I think you've been there before. So we are one of the larger catering venues in Western Connecticut, and we are a private event venue, and we do many, many different styles of events. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk today.
And then to my right, I have Phil Barnett.
Hello, thank you for having us here today. Yeah, my name is Phil Barnett. I know some of the faces around here from over the years. I own the Wooden Taps. Our home office is right up the street here on Bartholomew, about not even a mile from here. The original Wooden Tap stands right up the street here as well. So it's a pleasure to be here today. I'm looking forward to answering any questions.
All right. So obviously a caterer, you know, a restaurant group, which has 9 currently in Connecticut, soon to be 10 in Groton as they're working hard. Can talk a little bit, obviously, for the timing and understand. Representative Tigliano, I think, did a really good job of explaining what he's going through as independent restaurant owner, you know, and the Trumbull and all the different locations that he has down the Naugatuck Valley. But I think these two can share the same. But just what I was asked to do a little bit too is to give you guys a sense of what's really going on in the industry. You know, representing not only the state, obviously sitting on the board of the National Restaurant Association, I can kind of speak to what's happening nationally as well and how it impacts Connecticut and what we think the future of Connecticut is. So just a quick snapshot. We talk about the sheer scope of the restaurant industry in Connecticut. We have over 9,100 locations throughout the state. It's $12.2 billion in sales, a little over 150,000 employees. It's the second largest private sector employee employer not only in the state but also in the country. Or sorry, it's fourth here, but I actually think that number is almost third or second now. Also, a data point that is not on here, but I love to talk about it so you guys understand. And when we talk about the impact in the next slide here is 97% of full service restaurants in Connecticut are independently owned. We're the number one state in the country with that stat. It's a phenomenal stat. We talk about all the time about restaurants where you are, and you can go almost anywhere within your town and probably find first or second generation restaurant, different cuisines, all across that scope. And I think that is an unbelievable stat, as I tell the governor all the time, but also I worry about what that number is going to look like over the next 5 to 10 years. 97%, obviously, it's hard for it to go any higher. Unfortunately, it could get lower. So this next screen, I think, I apologize, it's a little small. I know that the clerk handed out more of a deck. I can send this as a full PDF, but as I was down to my national meetings, kind of talking about what inflation really has done for the industry, I think this gives a pretty good sense of, what you're seeing. I don't need to read it off, but I think that people say, oh, well, food costs, is that what restaurants are faced with? Just looking since 2019, this is the cost increase average percentage across the board. So when I have customers say to me, why is a burger now in Manchester $20 when it was in 2019 $13.50? Wow, they're really trying to take advantage of me as an owner operator. Like, it's so expensive now. And understanding that, it's super frustrating, because back to that point is, it's not just food costs. Food costs are averaging 29%, labor 31%, occupancy and rent and lease 12%, utilities. This is obviously a national number. I'd love to know what the Connecticut number is on utilities, but it's 16%. Swipe fees, which we'll talk about in a second with credit card fees, is 32% increase from the banks and the credit card companies. Supplies, 20%. So this is the burden of what a restaurant owner is going through every day. I talk all the time about efficiency to them. I try to give them as much as I can and what knowledge I know for them to be successful. But at the same time, this is the real reality that we're faced with. As much as someone might say, hey, they were busy on a Friday or Saturday night, I'll say, were they open at lunch on Wednesday? Did you see anybody there? They need to sustain, people coming in and out of their restaurants to be successful. And the average profit margin for a restaurant, so everyone knows here, is between 3 and 5%. It's one of the lowest profit margin businesses in the country, in the world, 3 to 5%. So understand, their labor and food costs on average are anywhere between 33% each. And then obviously everything else about 29, leaving them, if they're profitable, 5%. But any increase like you see here makes it almost impossible to stay profitable or stay in business. And that's what you're seeing. Calls like I have is down in Willimantic, having a conversation with the owner of Stone Row a couple weeks ago, seeing that restaurant, a staple, a Crazy's award winner, one of the best restaurants in the state, having to close their doors for many reasons. To see so many independent restaurants call me staples and worried about their future, that's the honest truth of where the state of the industry is right now. I'm happy as we get through this to have each of Phil and Doug talk about what they're faced with in each of their businesses. But I at least wanted to give you guys a sense of where we are. And then obviously answering the question, how can the Commerce Committee or even other legislative committees help this industry directly? I think I could go through a litany of different issues, but I wanted to focus on 3 specific. So one in particular, Representative Chingalan already talked about, the minimum wage increase in the index. I was here, I've been in this role almost 7 years. When in 2018, it was looked to go from 10 to 15. And then there was an index, which is called the Employment Cost Index, or ECI. We're the only state in the country that has ECI index. Obviously, the speaker at the time, Speaker Asimowicz, and we all looked at it and said, hey, it's between 12 and 20 cents. It's non-volatile. CPI has a lot more volatility. We didn't know, we didn't have a crystal ball that COVID was going to happen. It became one of the most volatile indexes. So what does that mean? Since the last 2 years, it's gone up 69 cents, the minimum wage, and 65 cents. We are now at $13.65 is our minimum wage. I'm sorry, 16.35 of where we are minimum wage. This is a map that I think answers the question of how we compare across the country. I'm happy to share this in more detail, but we are the 3rd highest minimum wage in the country. We are, and this is as a state. Obviously, people can argue with me about cities. I don't think we should be comparing ourselves to Chicago or other areas like that. But from a state side, as you know, we have state laws. You could say Greenwich might be different than Winstead or Avon or Simsbury, but as a minimum wage to be the third highest. And the two above us are out on the West Coast, Washington at 1666 and California at 1650. My concern with ECI is we could be number one starting on January 1st, 2026. We don't know what ECI is going to be yet. We know right now it's hopefully starting to trend down, but it only trended down by 4 cents from 69 to 65. So understand that we don't know what that trend is. CPI would have been 32.28 this past year. So this is the first piece of legislation that I'm trying to work with the Labor Committee and others to talk about, hey, is there ways to slow this down and be competitive? Senator Hartley asked that question. Just look at your Northeast peers, as you're looking up on the map, obviously Vermont, Maine, Massachusetts, New York, we are outpacing our peers with minimum wage. I think the representative did a really good job of talking about, hey, a lot of the industry doesn't pay right at the baseline, but we're one of the highest industries for hourly workers. So people that are making an hourly wage, when this increase goes up every year, as it has the last 6, they're all asking for a raise. That labor push, that increase is costing the business dollars, and also the only option they have is to raise prices, or they don't stay in business. So I think that's a piece of legislation. I appreciate that the committee has us here today to talk, but I think that's something that, I want to be competitive, as I tell the governor all the time. We have to be competitive in New England. I don't want to be the third highest minimum wage, in the country. It affects all aspects of small business, not just restaurants. It affects the ancillary businesses that provide, whether it's delivery, whether it's florist, whether it's all the grounds crew, everything else that goes on to a restaurant. Think about how the impact of minimum wage and the cost of living is in our state. So obviously wanted to share this map. This obviously gets updated, but happy to share that it is something that scares me every day. So the second piece, so as I go back through, I'll go back. So that's the minimum wage. We could talk about that. Connecticut Hospitality Fund. Yesterday, I did a press conference in West Hartford Center with the mayor, Senator Slapp, talking about the Connecticut Hospitality Fund. And what is that? That is a plan to reinvest the 1% meals and beverage tax into 3 buckets. 1, back to municipalities, to all of your towns that you guys go back and represent. 50% of the 1% would go back to towns, which was the intent of the 1% back in 2018, 2019. 30% to the Office of Tourism to have a competitive budget in New England for tourism and what we need to do, because we receive the benefit of our state competing in the tourism office and having a viable, it's not just a billboard on 91, as everyone likes to say sometimes to me, a tourism office with $20 or $30 million in it. When you look at what Maine is spending 26, Rhode Island is spending 13. Our state is at 7.5. And I'll go to this next slide. So this is our tourism budget since 2019. The blue is the general fund. The orange is federal funds. Obviously, there's no federal fund spending in July 1st, 2025. So we're going to go back down to $4.5 million. We were at 12.1 in 2022. People say, well, it's okay. We might not be able to market the state. It's not just advertising, it's staff. It's Anthony's team at the DCD that I think provides, the biggest piece to this is we talked about this with the moderate caucus, going after bids for the NCAA tournament, bringing in conferences, having the staff to do that. PR agencies that can go and talk to the New York Times or Forbes and seeing articles about Litchfield County and having hotels be top 5 in the country, or having, chefs and cuisines being ranked top 50 dishes. That doesn't just happen organically. You have to be competitive in this space. So tourism dollars, this is the hospitality fund. This is another direct impact of us going from 12.1 down to 7.5. Both these slides come from the Office of Tourism, obviously being on their committee, so this isn't coming from us, but this is also very alarming and should be for this committee. Look at the tourism website visitors, which were blue in 2023 in August, but look at year to date, they're down almost 39%. Why is that? We're not able to advertise and spend to get more eyeballs through social, other ways to try to draw visitors to that site, which is a leader with CT Visit, to have people want to say, hey, I want to come to Connecticut to eat. I want to come to Connecticut to stay over. And maybe in the long term, maybe they want to come to Connecticut to stay, have a job, and raise a family. So that's the second piece. This is obviously more details on the hospitality plan that we presented yesterday. There is Senate Bill 739, which is a specific bill that Senator Looney has put out. Obviously, just the language in it right now is all going back to municipalities, but we're trying to work with his office and other legislators about how important it is that 30% goes into tourism. And the last 20%, I will also say this, is workforce development. We're 10% of the state's workforce. The Office of Workforce Strategy, giving them funding and giving them an opportunity to support not only our association, but so many other universities and such for hospitality future jobs. And we need to do more in that at a state level. So that's how this fund, that 1%, another question people like to ask me, it's generated a little more than $400 million since 2019 to the general fund. In fiscal year, I'm still waiting for the new annual report from DRS. I'm sure you guys are as well, but from fiscal year 2022, 2023, the 1% generated $106 million, just the 1%, $106 million back to the general fund. And we're looking at our tourism budget and bringing it down to 7.5 now and down to 4. I don't have a slide, but I'm happy to get more information. The last one Representative Tigliano talked about, which we're going to, work with the finance committee as well. There's going to hopefully be 30 states trying to pass this piece of legislation. One specific burden is swipe fees and credit card fees with the banks and credit card companies. Anybody knows it's becoming the third highest cost in our industry, some second highest cost. But one piece of legislation that I think makes sense, common sense legislation, is right now all merchants in Connecticut pay fees to collect state sales tax. It's about $130 million. Not going to the state, going to the credit card and banks. This piece of legislation that we hope that got out of the finance committee last year, we hope to do again, is to work to try to eliminate any fees on sales. These businesses to my right and left are collecting the state sales tax and then obviously giving it, being like escrow, holding it in, then giving it at the end of the month. They're having to pay fees to do that. They're having to pay between 2.25%, if it's American Express, probably a little over 3 or 4%, just to do that. So obviously we could talk about the percentage and the rates for other things, but specifically, in the example I gave to the finance committee is New Hampshire doesn't have a state sales tax. So why are the banks and credit card companies treating them any different than our restaurants, our merchants in our state by charging fees to collect state sales tax? And ours is 7.35, not 6.35. So that's an extra $2 or $3 million they're collecting because of that meals and beverage tax every year. So these are the three pieces. I don't want to steal the thunder because I do think that Doug and Phil can really speak to each of their industries. And if you guys have questions for them, I welcome those. I really appreciate you guys giving us the floor here, the time to come in and speak to this committee. I think Representative Tigliano, saying that. I mean, at the end of the day, I want to see a vibrant and great restaurant industry. I think we have one of the best in the country, but I have very much concerns what our future holds for our independent operators. And I appreciate the time today, and we welcome any questions.
So I'll open it up to questions. We'll start with Representative Vail.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick one. Thank you for being here. I'm hearing your message. I think Representative Tigliano expressed it well too, but you had a chart up there about minimum wage all over the country. Now there's minimum wage and then there's a service minimum wage in most states, correct? With the exception of a few.
Correct. The tip credit. Yes.
The tip credit. And so I used to bartend, and I actually was a busboy in Jimmy's of Savin Rock, the Hamden one, not the original, the one with the cars under the pavement. It was pretty cool. But so we made a little bit less, but we got tips and stuff like that. And that's kind of always been, but the tips, my son is a waiter. He goes to college in Newport and he makes pretty darn good money waiting tables. And I think he's looking at his tips at the end more than he's worried about what he's going to get in his paycheck. So is in Connecticut now, is the minimum wage the same for the service industry, or is that still that difference for the tip?
It's a great question, Representative Vail. So we have what's called a tip credit. If you guys know, in the Labor Committee, there was a push last year to try to eliminate the tip credit. As happened across the country as well. We have one of the highest tip credits. We actually are the only state to have two different credits. We have a server and we have a bartender. So it's $638 is the credit. It's not a wage, it's the credit, and $823 is the bartender. So that's what you can pay hourly to a server plus their tips have to equal $1635. We go up to, just round the number, 17. Every server and bartender, this is what I say to the Labor Committee every day, they're guaranteed to make minimum wage. By federal and state law, they have to make minimum wage. We know they're not. They're making anywhere We did a survey last year on average $35 an hour. Is the average. Some places it's 40, 45, 50. So the tip credit is already, if you take the average of the two, it's about 7.25. It puts us in probably the top 5 in the country for a tip credit, which the minimum, the federal is, I believe it's 275 is the federal credit. So we're 3, almost 4 times higher than the federal tip credit, but it's just the credit that an owner operator can provide for that. But obviously that's why I'll give another example. Massachusetts, just this past November, there was on the ballot, they tried to eliminate the tip credit. The general public voted it down 65%. With the servers and bartenders wanted to keep their credit, which is lower than ours, because they're making significantly more than minimum wage. They're afraid of what's happening in Chicago and Washington, D.C., or out on the West Coast where this has been eliminated. It actually hurts the people they're trying to help. The servers and bartenders are making significantly less money. You can just read the news in Washington, D.C. They're fleeing the district to go on the outskirts because their tip credit is still viable, and they're making significantly more in tips.
So how does it affect here in Connecticut? So what's the adverse effect on the restaurant here in Connecticut with the increased tip credit, and then the adverse effect potentially on the wait staff or servers?
So currently within the tip credit has not increased. The gap between the minimum wage has, but the tip credit has stayed at 638 and 823 since 2018, which was part of our negotiation as we talked, because it is one of the highest. But understand that it's really the wages that are going up that are affecting less. It's less about the servers and bartenders. It's more about the rest of the employees. And speaking directly, I guess I could let Doug chime in as well. As a caterer, he's not advantageous. He can't take the tip credit. All of his employees at the Amber Room have to make above minimum wage, and they don't have that ability. So, we are more concerned with where the minimum wage is currently and as it goes up. But also, we will continue to have the conversation that the servers and bartenders want to keep that credit at the level that it is, because it doesn't matter what the gap is. They're guaranteed to make minimum wage every shift, every hour that they're there. That answers.
It does. Thank you.
I'll jump in for a moment, Representative Vale. You mentioned before that minimum wage had gone up about 60% in the past 5 years, which is quite a lot, as you can imagine. As Scott just mentioned, we do pay above minimum wage, being a caterer and private event venue. And back before the huge increase, we prided ourselves on always paying higher than minimum wage, because that was the right thing to do. As it keeps going up and up and up, and it's harder to predict every year what that's going to be, and especially for someone in my line of industry, when somebody books an event, sometimes it's a year out, 2 years out, 3 years out, which makes it even more challenging to figure out what the pricing structure is going to be. The compression rate is what's really hurting us a lot. We have members of our team that have been with us for 15, sometimes even 20 years. And the ones that have been making higher wages, rightfully so, because of experience, we've noticed that compression rate is getting smaller and smaller. And it's very challenging we hire a lot of high school students, a lot of college students, to provide opportunity for those people. And it's very challenging to justify somebody who's never had a day of work in their life getting $16.35, soon to be most likely $17, when somebody else is getting now only a few dollars more. So that's really one of the big challenges that we face, not to mention back of the house as well. I will say that I've always believed and strongly believe in this business. The hospitality industry really provides the best education for any young person. Not only do they learn how to have hard work and good work ethic, but it allows, especially in today's day and age, allows our younger generation to learn how to interact with people. And I think we can all agree that most young people these days have high anxiety. They don't know how to talk to people, and the hospitality industry provides a forum for them to learn that important life skills.
Thank you very much, Representative Buckby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll be brief. I can see the looks around the room. Everybody's going, okay, we've had the story. We know what it is. I want to first off say thank you guys for coming in. I think it's critical for us to hear what you have to say. I think it's critical for us to take the time to hear directly from the industry. And while Representative Vale mentioned his time as a bartender, I worked as a bartender. I worked as a bouncer for years, if you can picture that one. I was the mean guy. Um, but the boots on the ground and hearing this directly from you, especially hearing from places we can relate to. I can't tell you how many times I've been down there, and I think I've performed weddings in your facility as well. And always, your staff is absolutely worth well more than minimum wage. They are fantastic staff across the board. Everyone's always wonderful. My thought is, I guess, to the chairs too on this, as we discussed, and you mentioned more around the country in Chicago and different places as we face all this with credit card fees. Well, credit card fees just opens up a discussion for me because I run a small nonprofit and we fight even as a little nonprofit to what our little fee is going to be on every credit card transaction. And then take on top of that, I sit on the energy committee, and if we look at this at our public benefits charge on the energy bill, it's all based on usage. So the more you use, the more of a percentage and a higher percentage you're paying, just like on a dinner bill on that credit card. Has there been thought to trying to flatten this out to a flat fee for credit card use? And has that been done within the industry that you're aware of anywhere?
I can speak that, there hasn't been a piece of legislation on capping fees. Obviously be open to a discussion. Obviously, I think the banking committee and others might have a different take on that. But I will say, you know, I've been in the role 7 years, and when you see the credit card fees and swipe fees, just the increases, it's really no one, it's competitive. It's competitive for them. When you look at a small mom and pop that, is paying, the highest rates. And also our industry is a target because of the amount of credit cards. You think about it, it's volume. Everyone goes in with their own card. Maybe have a table that we're sharing 3-4 cards. That's why our rates are also so high, because of that and the amount of transactions and swipes you have per day. So I think it's something that we want to continue, and I appreciate you bringing that up, Representative, that there's got to be different ways. That's why we started with the sales tax piece, because it just doesn't make sense to me that there's $130 million going out. It doesn't affect the state budget at all. It's leaving the merchants and it's going to the credit card companies and the banks, for sales tax. I think that's a start, but I think, yes, there's more discussion, especially in the world that we have when people want to talk about cash tips, and credit cards are about 90, almost 91% of transactions now. And I have a 15 and 12-year-old and 7-year-old, like they don't even I struggle with them on knowing the difference of dimes and nickels. I think I said my last year and I did this, but they know what Apple Pay is. They know what my credit card looks like. And that's the future. So we have to get our arms around this because it's going to impact independent businesses in a big way. It already has, but I think there's ways that we could do it.
I appreciate you saying that. And that's where that comes across the full commerce picture to me. Just looking around on our side of here, I'm not going to guess because I don't live in Greenwich, but how many of you have that much cash in your pocket right now? Right? How many of you are carrying cash? You got a couple people with cash. Restaurant people always have cash in pocket. That's always the rule.
Representative's a little different. I make sure.
But for the most part, we all walk around with credit cards, and it's all credit card transaction all the time on the commerce side of the business. And the more that climbs, the more it takes a hit on you guys, on the sales tax piece of it, every piece of this. So I think that's actually a really important piece that you brought to the table today. I think it's something we should try to take a little bigger look at is the impact on the credit card company as they've jumped every single year. And I know for me, from our nonprofit, I've looked around different people for swipe fees and how much I'm paying more. And if it's 1%, it's 1%. I'll jump at 1% difference from one company to the next. But everybody, if you left here and you wanted to go out and get an ice cream cone, you're playing with a card, and that's a small margin to start with. Now you're paying for a $3 item with a credit card, and they're paying their processing fees on top of that. So from everyone, from the large scale, from the massive Ritigliano businesses to all the way down to that little ice cream cone shop, this is a massive impact, and I hope this is something we can really take a look at with credit card fees and processing fees. So again, thank you very much. Especially thank you for coming up from Danbury, because it's close to the best town in the USA, but it's a long drive coming up here from there. You had a question on that?
Yeah, I'd like to chime in on that if you don't mind a little bit, Representative, because I think you're right on with that. And first of all, I do want to say that, Representative Ritigliano, when what he spoke about before, he's not embellishing anything. That's our reality. That's our everyday reality of what he was saying before. So if he seemed like he was getting a little bit fired up, I don't think he got fired up enough personally, but I do like when I see him get a little fired up because it's very passionate about our industry in a whole, right? There's something else I want to talk about when it comes down to credit card fees, okay? Is 2020, when we had the pandemic, it changed our industry significantly. And I think somebody mentioned, I'm not sure who mentioned it before, but mentioned how there's a lot more individuals in the suburbs now not coming in, or there's a lot less feet on the ground. Okay. That has changed. That has allowed people not to have to leave their homes, which we know. So I think Representative Retigliano mentioned about, DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grubhub, all of them, they take a huge percentage right now too. And there's also credit card fees, but they actually eat those credit card fees. But there's other stuff that goes on with the credit card fees that people don't understand as well, is the fact that, there's a lot of credit card fraud that goes on, that we have to eat that. The banks they got to buy a long time ago. Okay. Federally, we have to eat that right now. If you don't have the chip in your credit card, you pretty much can't even fight that. Okay. So the amount of fraud that we deal with, but I'm going to go into something else really quick. I'm going to kind of go off topic for just a moment, because I want you to think about one thing, if I can. If there's one thing I want to leave you with, is what we talk about in our industry, it's called prime cost. Prime stands for your primary costs. Okay. The two prime costs that we talk about are our labor and our cost of goods. So whether it be your cost of goods, your food, your liquor, your beer, wine, okay, that would be your cost of goods, and your labor costs, okay, which are, the investment into your staff. If you think about 60%, okay, about 30% for each one, if we just use round numbers, that's 60% of the whole. That doesn't include buying a plate, doesn't include your rent, that doesn't include the utilities that we all live with. So just take 60% if you're a good operator. Okay, most of the time it's 65 for smaller operators. So just peel that off, and now you're dealing with 35% of that money left. Then you start dealing with all these credit card fees that don't stop right now. And you also have to now take 20% and give that to a third-party delivery company. So when Representative Retigliano is saying what he's saying it because it is real. 3 to 5%, those are real numbers. So you're fighting for that, and then you're still dealing with a lot of theft in our industry. Let's not kid ourselves. There's still a lot of theft. So I wanted to share some of that information with each one of you, because I think it's really important that when we come up here and we're speaking on behalf of the industry itself, we're not sitting here crying. We're just literally trying to tell our story, how important it is to understand what we're going through every day. What Mr. Dolce over here said, dead on. I'm like, I can't agree more with what's been said today. It's like, I just sit back. I like to talk a lot. I can talk more than Retigliano, I can tell you right now. So we can be here for a lot longer if you want. But they've said enough already, because I think they're telling the truth. So that's all I have for right now, but I'm sure I can answer a lot more questions shortly.
And then just to follow that as well, you mentioned energy. I think what a lot of us don't realize, and unfortunately, I just received notice from Eversource, is that there's a proposal for a 24% increase in natural gas. And I think a lot of us in the industry haven't come to terms with that yet, but that's another additional increase that we're going to be facing come November if Pure agrees to that.
Well, I want to thank you all for your testimony. It's been certainly enlightening. I think, Scott, there's a lot of different touchstones and issues and difficulty in resolving between wages, costs, pricing. I think one of the things as commerce, what strikes me is the surtax on the restaurants, which I would have hoped would have been reinvested both in those communities and reinvested at some portion of it into fostering more economic growth in tourism, et cetera. I know I've sat here and we've had a working group with Mystic, and we'll have commentary going forward. But economic activity and the sales tax around economic activity ends up at the capital. It gets reapportioned to the capital. So any way we can increase the leverage to make sure some of that money is reapportioned back to the areas of economic activity, to reinvest in them and to grow the economy, as well as lifting everyone, I think is super important. I'm not sure where we'll go this time in the budget, but it stays a present interest of mine in the commerce.
Well, I hope all of your mayors and first selectmen, if they haven't called you yet, hopefully that they are on this piece of legislation on the hospitality fund. But just to put it in round numbers, I mean, a year and a half ago, our sales and use tax was a little over $1.2 billion, and hospitality went back to the state. The 1% was a little over 100 million. Just understanding, besides property tax, all the other things that our industry is generating for the state. I don't asking for 20 or 30 million dollars to have a tourism office that's competitive. I don't want to be, let's make it like Rhode Island. I think we need, when you look at Maine, even out with Maine spending 26, but Pure Michigan's campaign's 35, like all these other states, we want to be a competitive state to bring people in the short term and hopefully for the long term. And I can tell you directly the benefits that that office has provided this industry has been second to none. I will stand here and say I think Anthony, as a leader of the tourism office, is doing phenomenal work, but he needs resources for that, and that's why we're standing here today trying to do that and find that out. So I'm hopeful we can, Representative, figure out a way to to do that this budget cycle. I'm interested to see what the governor has to say tomorrow, as I'm sure all of you are. But you know, at the end of the day, it's extremely important that you need to support an industry that's providing so much back to the state. It just makes so much sense, and also for the towns and municipalities that are generating. And I think it's a common sense piece of legislation. The 1% is based on your town. If West Hartford is doing better with restaurants and hotels, they're going to get that 1% that they generated. I think it encourages our towns to do more and support hospitality. And so I'm looking forward to seeing the next couple weeks, but happy to talk to you guys offline about how we can, you know, really put dollars into tourism, workforce development, hospitality as a whole. So thank you.
So turn it over to my co-chair.
Just very briefly, thank you so much for the real unfiltered look into the industry. You talked about the fact that 97% of the restaurants were independent owned. So that would include even the small franchise restaurants.
There's not a whole lot of franchise full service. So it's 97% full service. So a full service restaurant, it's about 3,200 is the last stat I have, right around there. Of the 9,100 are full service restaurants. Obviously, a seated, sit down, server and bar. I think it actually does not. The independents do not include, if you're under a franchise name, it does not include franchise or corporations. That 97% is purely LLC and independent restaurants in our state.
Thank you. That's interesting. Yeah. And then lastly, with regard to this conversation about the fees, is there any model legislation? Is there any state that has such a thing? And are you promoting any proposal here during this session?
I know that there's when you talk about the credit card fees, Senator, is that, Adam, I just want to make sure I'm right. So there's, I believe that Representative Horn and others have put a bill forward. I don't know the actual number, but I can get that to the committee here. There is also, you know, I mentioned before about 30 states that are putting out a piece of legislation this year. But one of the topics last year was the state hadn't passed it yet. The state of Illinois last year passed no interchange fees on sales tax collection. So it was the first state to pass it in Illinois, and now you're going to see a number of other states looking to do the same. I'm hoping Connecticut becomes number 2 because I think that's a significant. If I could go to any of the restaurants right now and said, hey, in 2026 or maybe earlier in October, you know, you do not have to pay credit card swipe fees on sales tax collection. It's a significant. Every little bit helps. When we listen to Doug talk about energy and, you know, natural gas and, you know, everything that's coming at us. I mean, this isn't just a state side. It's also, you know, dealing with what's happening, you know, down in DC and some of the challenges with the new administration, how it affects our industry. So I definitely have concerns about what the future holds for independent restaurants. So, you know, and I want to see more of them stay in business and add more businesses as opposed to, I think Representative Tigliano said he's lost a couple over the last couple of years. I never want to hear that.
So there is a bill in finance, is what you're telling us.
Yes.
And this is the first year that we've had that bill, or has it been around?
This is the second year. It got through the finance committee last year, got deferred to banking, and then it never made it to either one of the floors.
And what's the number? Do you have that bill number?
I do not, but I will get it to you guys after this.
Yeah, get it to us.
Please.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I think this concludes a public hearing. I really want to appreciate, it was certainly a robust description of the obstacles facing our industry. And as Commerce, you know, we care about our industry and our growth. And I want to thank our representative for testifying as well. And so I want to wish you all a good afternoon and thank you.